Well, for a deeper look and more reaction, let's turn to Deborah Elms, who's head of trade policy at Hinrich Foundation. It's good to see you, Deborah. Can I first get your thoughts, your observations as the two men met? President Trump very generous with his words. President Xi more careful to preface the meeting. Anything stood out for you?
Well, we all know how fraught this relationship has been and how tense it can get, and also how less tense it can get. And I think we saw all of that swing in attitude from very hawkish to much more dovish in about 5 minutes in the opening communication between the two leaders. You know, Trump, just as he headed into the meeting, as you noted earlier, announced a policy of resuming nuclear testing, which is certainly not on anyone's bingo card that I know of, and yet arrived in Korea apparently prepared to have an excellent meeting and a fantastic outcome. But you can imagine that this, again, the swing from hawkish to not hawkish, literally within a space of minutes, is creating real challenges for everyone who has to meet with Trump.
All right, let's go into the mind of the man on that comment about starting nuclear tests immediately. Was President Trump trying to set the tone for negotiations, or was that comment more about projecting strength and maybe even drawing in North Korea while he's on the peninsula?
I have no idea. I mean, it's very hard to channel Trump normally, but I think this one in particular came, from my perspective, out of nowhere. I think it's an attempt to try to show that the United States has more cards to play in this relationship. It's not all about, soybeans and semiconductors and critical technologies. There are other things that are at stake and at risk, but this is a particularly dangerous thing to be waving about, the sort of nuclear weapon card. So we'll see how well that set up the meeting for either great success in the face of yet another threat from the United States, or potentially less success given the uncertainty that can be unleashed at a moment's notice.
Yeah, dangerous indeed. Well, the meeting is being closely watched by markets and analysts as well as a possible inflection point in U.S.-China relations. How transformational do you expect this to be?
Well, I'm not holding my breath, honestly. What I would like to see out of it is something very modest, which is really just an attempt to avoid escalation. That, for me, would be a win if we could just agree that for a temporary period of time, perhaps a year, there would be less escalation, fewer tariff threats at least, potentially more purchases both directions of key items like critical minerals and soybeans, that there could be also crucial, a better pathway to ongoing discussions, including ongoing discussions at the leaders level. I think that does help in this kind of fraught relationship. But it's not going to go away. We're going to be having repeated meetings between now and certainly whenever Trump leaves and even after that about how the U.S. and China attempt to reset this relationship that has been changed dramatically over the last few months of this Trump administration.
Okay, so you don't see this one as one that will completely tie up loose ends. Let's talk about something that's bigger as well. In another part of the world, the Ukraine-Russia war, President Trump has indicated that he expects President Xi might play a role in helping end the war in Ukraine and that China's relationship with Russia will be discussed. What'll happen there?
I think, again, this is a bit of a challenge. The meeting that's going on in Busan is only scheduled for 2 hours. It could, of course, potentially be a bit longer, although the plane for Trump is already on the tarmac and ready to leave. So I don't know how much longer they're going to postpone this. That means that the focus needs to be very tight. And I suspect that trade will dominate this 2-hour discussion between the two sides, with potentially a bit of time for other issues, especially security issues, to be surfaced. But will they be able to get any kind of breakthrough on the security side, I think is a little bit less clear to me. I think the priority has been discuss trade first. Again, we're lined up for very high tariffs that are supposed to start tomorrow. And we need to have a discussion about whether those will go forward as intended or not. There's a whole new deadline coming on November 10th for a new set of economic punishment tools. So I think the economics are going to come at the beginning of this meeting, and that may take the full length of the time the two guys are together.
And whatever, of course, comes out of the meeting creeps into geopolitical ripple effects. South Korea, Japan, and other Asia-Pacific partners, they're watching this closely. What will the outcomes today mean for regional security, Deborah? Because the U.S.-China dynamic influences issues tied to South China Sea, Taiwan, North Korea as well.
Yes, clearly where all eyes are on Busan, again, both for economic and for political reasons. And I think it's interesting that this is taking place while the APEC summit is also ongoing. That gives an opportunity for the 21 economies in APEC to come together and have a conversation after this to say, wow, what did you think? How are you going to prepare? Is there some way in which we could work together? Can we accelerate progress in this venue, some other venue? And so I think it is quite interesting, the timing at the beginning of this APEC leaders meeting, that you set up the position for conversations at the highest level among some of the most important economies in and around this region.
And will the APEC summit lose its shine that the president doesn't stay on and join it?
Well, I think for me, the key point of APEC has always been, in my view at least, an opportunity for meetings to take place. And so in that sense, I would say it's already been successful, right? You've got 21 leaders in place. Even if the United States leader chooses to leave before the formal festivities get underway, the point is that they met now because of APEC. And so APEC has served its purpose, even if nothing else takes place. You need to have a place in the calendar where leaders can get together regularly, where they can surface issues, where they can resolve challenges, where they can address the future, where they can have sideline conversations, where they can at least bond over, tea and coffee. I think sometimes it's easy to dismiss those kinds of things as just chit chat. But if there was ever a moment in which you need to have sustained face-to-face leader discussions, it is literally right now. And so I'm actually delighted to see Korea hosting the APEC summit right now, especially after this meeting this morning, because it will give those leaders an opportunity to discuss this while all of the ideas, the emotions, and the concerns are fresh. And then they can start to plot plans forward. How will individual economies address this? How will APEC address it? And how will others be able to participate?
And there's still a bit of time before the two parties emerge from that meeting room in Busan. Talk to us about the path ahead. What do you expect to likely feature in joint or separate statements?
Well, the things that we're all watching for, again, is what happens with the tariff threats that have been levied that are supposed to start immediately. So are those going to be suspended or postponed? What is going on with export control regimes? Are they going to go in force as intended? Will there be a pause on those? Will there be a discussion about removing potential entities from the lists on both sides? What will happen with agricultural purchases? The U.S. just launched a new Section 301 investigation of whether China was upholding its past commitments under the first Trump administration. I'm sure that will be on the agenda, too. What will that look like? And also, finally, and I think, again, for me, this is important, what is the future path for dialogue between these two sides? The plan at the moment, or at least coming into this, was to have additional leaders meeting, have Trump go to Beijing, potentially have Xi come to Washington. Is that still on the table? Can they set a date for that now? Is there going to be additional meetings at lower levels? Do we have more clarity about when those will take place? That's quite important. Again, the risks are very high for miscalculation and miscommunication. So the more conversations you can have, the better we should all feel, at least, I hope, that this relationship doesn't suddenly spin off the rails.
Deborah, thank you so much for your insight and for talking with us today. Deborah Elms is Head of Trade Policy at Hinrich Foundation.